I want to just open the floor. I see that there's maybe a few chats emerging already, but this is our chance. Any of you, if you have any questions for Anna Binta, I know my mind is really going to many places and already has been because I've been thinking about your work already, but how I would convey it and talk about it to students. And I guess it just as one quick thing, I think a thing that I find really exciting about, because I've engaged mostly with this wanderings work, is thinking about the scale of the work and how you were talking about viewers interacting with it in the spaces, and they choose how they approach it, and also how the stories change depending on the perspective. I'm conveying this work to students digitally, like not in person necessarily, but this is something I really feel excited about conveying, that these are characters that are large scale and you approach them and have your own interaction with them and walk around the space. And that's something I'm finding really exciting and thinking about how I want to talk about that with students. Anyway, that's just me, but I want to open the floor. And if you have a question, I see there are some, maybe we'll call out people's names as we see the questions. So I see Allison, your hand went up there.
Oh, Anna Binta, just I have to show my face, just so you can see the smile on my face here. Oh, I just loved this time. Thank you. The generosity of your story, the interpretation of your story, your creative process. What a gift. Thank you. I love, again, that connection. And you mentioned how characters that don't have the opportunity to interact with one another in real life. And I'm thinking about us, right? And bringing those connections together for all of us across, so many kilometers, miles, provinces. I think the generosity. I loved how you spoke about the stories of the inside, being inside of the story and outside of the story, and about the location. That's spinning in my mind's eye. And, again, with Amelia, this afternoon we're going to get to see your work again at Access. And, that it's very crucial being able to have those relationships and connection with your characters and with each other. So, an enormous thank you. It's been fantastic. And again, I'm so excited to be able to share these ideas and connect our community. So thank you again.
Thank you so much. Very nice.
I see that, Sean, you have a question if you want to go ahead. And maybe just make sure that you unmute yourself. Oh, Sean, oh, there you are.
Internet is kind of just acting up at a bad moment.
Do we want to, Sean, come back to you? And I see that Valerie has a question. We can maybe move on to Valerie, and then Sean will come back if you're having a technology moment.
I just wanted to thank everybody for inviting me. I'm not a teacher per se in the school district. I'm an education assistant. However, I do a Black History Month program at the schools that I work in, and right now I'm at Carson Graham Senior Secondary. And I had been asking Dalen, when are we going to do something that reflects an African heritage perspective? And then he tells me about this. So I'm so excited to be a part of it. And I'm looking forward to going to your exhibit in Vancouver. Now, my question is, as an African heritage person and mixed heritage, because I'm the same, and I think sometimes people expect for me to focus more on the African side because that's how I look to them. But I'm so excited that you do mixed heritage because that's what I've been doing. And it's so weird, but I've also been using collage as a medium to show that. So my question for you is, how do you find that people are surprised that your work is coming from an African perspective, or you know what I mean? Like, are they expecting it not to be a Black person? So these are the kind of questions we ask each other.
Yeah, I think for me, I've always been interested in this like idea of like the woven identity. Like I'm mixed, I'm French Canadian, Franco Métis, Senegalese, and I think I've kind of refused to kind of say. I've always thought it would be fair to explore like all facets of my background, and I think maybe at first I started looking into my African heritage because I didn't grow up there, but I've always been connected to that side of my family because I've gone to Senegal. I have many family members from Senegal that live in Manitoba still, and I've also. But I think that even though there's that physical distance, there's still a way to explore it. And then on the flip side of that, I live in Manitoba. My French Canadian family is there, and I found out that there was some stuff in my own family that I wasn't aware of, and I had to go dig it up for it, which kind of made me think, there's things in both of these cultures that are like hidden or difficult to access, and so I thought that's why I think I'm not sure what people think actually, if they think it's an African person or a Francophone person or someone with Indigenous heritage as well. But I don't want to necessarily stay put in one category, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sean, do you want to go ahead?
Yes. Hi, thank you very much. I really appreciated your presentation. And I had a question regarding some of the collage elements that you bring in. Do you take into consideration what those are images of and how that might change the context of the work? So for instance, if the background is of Lake Louise, there's a lot of history behind, say, the naming of the lake, for instance. That's just an example. But that would be my question. Is that put into consideration?
I think definitely it is. I definitely consider, like, before I will decide on the image, I think there's a few things there. There's like, I'm interested in the image, maybe just by pure like shape, color, or representation, but I also think about what it represents. So I'm thinking, I always think that, an image can say so much. And I think for me, I'm really interested in disrupting that image in a way that it's almost like you almost have to look at it from a different perspective, because I want to break down the origin of it. So a lot of times I'll look at books that are kind of problematic. Like there's some like ethnographic photography happening, or they're really outdated books that were actually like thrown out of the library because they're just no longer considered politically correct. So I'm looking at these books and I think that there's a lot of interesting things sometimes in there. And my goal is not to kind of perpetuate the same messages with these images, but I really want to disrupt the image to kind of make a larger comment on how we do consume these images and how they do shape who we are. And sometimes we don't even know. And I think that's why I'll choose certain images. And I think there is also an intuitive process. Sometimes maybe I'll say, oh yeah, this image I'll put here. But other times I might just like end up selecting something and then thinking after, oh, like that, I guess I picked that because of this. Like, so there is a balance between like intuition and then also choice. And I don't want to make it too, I guess I also want to leave some, I don't want to dictate necessarily what it is I'm saying within the artwork. I want to leave some interpretation to the viewer, because each viewer, like I said, will have a different association with that image. I don't know if that answers.
No, very much so. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dalen, do you want to go ahead?
Hi, Anna Binta. Thanks so much, and thanks to everyone for joining us today. It's I wish we could all be sitting together around a big table and sharing coffees and stuff, but it's great to see so many people and hear the questions. And I've been to my questions has revolved really around the collage. It's kind of been new to my practice as a teacher in the last few years, and Emily bugs me because it becomes so much of my teaching practice these days here. But in some of your earlier collages, they really much worked with that rectangle. That's kind of like a painting or our traditional idea of art, where, you know, we look at things that are generally rectangular because they fit into frames and whatnot. And then I've seen a progression to like your wandering show where you have those kind of silhouetted figures that you're using. So it's the frame of the object, be it the caribou or the person or the rabbit or whatnot, that's reframing things and then like pulling them off the wall to get them sculptural and whatnot. But that kind of use of the negative space and whatnot, it feels very graphic. Like there's a design, like you were mentioning your design background, like that embracing the idea of white space and like that pause or resting space for the eye. So I don't know if this is me projecting a lot on your practice, but maybe if you could comment to some of that. I don't know if there's a question in there, but there was like, those were some of the ideas that were like triggering in my brain as I was watching the presentation. And thank you again.
Oh yeah, thank you. You're welcome. I think for me, the frame, I think, was something that I felt was a bit imposing on me in a way. Like I just always assumed, like, not assumed, but the way that I had been working as a designer and as a painter and collage, doing collage, it was always this idea of like a square and what ends up in that square or that rectangle. And I think I just started thinking, you know, there's got to be other ways to explore this work or these ideas without just resorting to this frame. And I'm not saying that's something that's bad. I think just for me, I was inspired to find a new way of communicating these ideas. And I think the idea of the white space might have just been because of where I was at the time. So I was in this big white studio at the BAM Center and I had all this space and it was kind of daunting. Like, how do I fill this space up? So I made the work and I put it up and it kind of became its own thing right then. But I think I was also maybe I think what happens is I'll create a body of work and then I'll be like, okay, I'm done with that now. Now what am I going to do? And I think it happened when I made video. I went back to collage, and then when I did the collages, I kept some elements, but I think I wanted to like leave. I think I felt like I overcharged the imagery so much that I wanted to like have some place to breathe. So it was maybe more of like an organic, it just kind of happened naturally that I did that, I think. But I wasn't I think there was those three things of like not necessarily having something in a frame and the idea to explore, and then also just the idea that I don't have to charge an image with so much stuff all the time. Although there is still a lot of stuff, but I think the white space kind of allows it, or the gallery space will allow some breathing room. Yeah.
Thank you. That's great.
Thank you.
Did anyone else have any specific queries or comments or questions at this time? Chris, do you want to go ahead?
All right. Hey, thanks, Anna, for the presentation. It was really, really fun to listen to. My favorite string of words was, can we be nostalgic for something we've never known? That was kind of I love that. But I have a specific question about your process, and I'm just wondering, does drawing play a role in your process at all? Or does it play a process, and if it does, what role does it play? Because I know you mentioned a little bit about creating these digital images and maybe doing some drawing and then filling in the images with collage work, or are all your forms and shapes starting with silhouettes and stuff pulled from collages? So I'm just wondering if you could comment on what role drawing plays.
Sure. So I think there is definitely a drawing connection, because when I first started painting, like I was really interested. I was always kind of interested in the silhouettes, and so I would paint silhouettes, and that's kind of what was my go-to of like things, how I would paint. And I didn't really pursue painting as a, like I didn't pursue my art practice as a painter because I saw limitations in how I want to create. But I think my interest in like silhouettes and drawing out these things translated themselves naturally into how I will illustrate, like how I will draw out a shape. And I can do it digitally or I can do it by hand. But I think it's a mixture of both of those things. And I think it is very much like the drawing is kind of my canvas now. So I'll draw out a silhouette or something and I can imagine what goes in it. But I think I'm very interested in like how people move, gestures, and how things move in space or how they stand still. So I think it is kind of like this interest in, it's kind of a drawing. It's there, you know. It's like I think people who draw often are interested in those. I guess you could say like poses or mannerisms and things that make them human, I guess. And I think that's kind of it's found itself. It was my interest as a painter, but it also found its way into this kind of collage, this design collage sculpture work as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That gives me some cool ideas for incorporating some gesture drawing as like a way to start image development.
Great. Thank you.
Beast, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, sure. Thank you so much for your presentation, Anita Binta. I really appreciated it, and I relate to the concept of your work being a first-generation immigrant, actually, and exploring some of those questions myself. I guess my question is with regards to your process and the materiality of some of the pieces. You had a slide that showed a wallpaper that you had designed for a hotel, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering what type of sort of paint or materials you used, and did you have to prime the plaster to install some of those shapes and forms?
So just to understand correctly, is it the shapes like of the artwork or for the slide where I had the actual wallpaper?
The actual wallpaper.
Yeah, so that was actually just a commission I had done for like an interior design company. And so I just created this digital file and then they printed it and installed it. So I wasn't actually involved in any of that. But it was just, I used that example to show how my interest in kind of, if I can create something for like an interior design firm, I can also use that technology and that skill set for my own artwork. So for that, I think they just used like, I don't know how they printed it, but it must have been sheets of paper. But in the work that I do, I discovered this, I guess it's an adhesive fabric. So I can print on it and it's adhesive to the wall, but it's also removable. So it's actually not permanent. It can be if you leave it up, but the work that I do is actually removable. Whereas the other example I showed was like a real like wallpaper for a lobby. Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Matt, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Hi there, Anna Binta. Thank you very much for doing this.
Yeah, no problem.
I think you've given me 3 really solid ideas for teaching my students in terms of reflecting your practice. One thing a lot of my students often say is they don't want to go to art school because they don't want to be a starving artist. And you've obviously gotten commissions and gotten paid work from it as a designer. Can you talk a little bit about the business side of it? Like, how do you go about actually making money from your art?
So I guess that's a very good question, because I think a lot of that depends on artist conundrum. It's a real thing. I think a lot of artists will encounter working very hard and not getting compensated sometimes, and trying different things before they get to a level where they can. I think for me, I encountered that as well, and I think you apply for funding and you get rejected. apply for residencies, you get rejected. And I think those rejections are actually really important, because either you give up or you think, okay, well, it wasn't good enough this time, but maybe I can come up with a better concept. And I think looking back now on things that I did apply for, I kind of cringe sometimes, thinking, oh, like, I can't believe that I thought I would get money for that. But I think that those rejections will actually make your process better in the end, because if you have the determination, you will like come up with some ideas that someone somewhere will want to fund. Or I think there's also, there's the commercial aspect of selling your work. And I think some people might go into that world where they want to sell paintings or sell sculptures. And I think for me, I was never really driven, because I had another career choice as a designer, which was actually, in fact, a choice because I remember my dad told me, well, you can't be an artist. How are you going to put money on the table? So I was like, well, don't worry, I have a backup plan. I'll be a graphic designer, and that can make me some money. So I myself struggled with that. And so because I had a job as a designer, I kind of wasn't necessarily using my art to make an income. So I think there's that as well. A lot of artists have other jobs. They teach, they work in design, they do other things. And I think, unfortunately, it's not a straightforward line for everyone, but I don't think it should discourage you from trying to make art, or at least exploring all the ways that can allow you to make art, and exploring all the avenues that are available. Don't be afraid to, there's going to be definitely some hard moments of, wanting to give up and things, but I think it's also an opportunity to learn about what it is that you want to do as an artist. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Anna.
Thank you.
Were there any other specific questions or queries or comments, maybe about process or technology or concepts anyone had? One question I wanted to ask, I'm having trouble actually formulating a specific question, but one of the things I'm so intrigued by is your exploration of the folk tales and stories. And one of the quotes I jotted down was your idea of filling up the characters with stories, which I love that idea. And when I look at collage figures, I can really see that. And I love the idea of these visual stories filling up the silhouettes. But I was thinking also about how you were talking about drawing on folk tales from Finland, from Ghana, and different places. And I think, if I interpret correctly, like you kind of choose maybe certain like archetypes or characters from some of these different stories. And I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit in terms of like your process of drawing upon folk tales from specific cultures and using these specific characters, but then perhaps leaving that ambiguous or like blended for the viewer, and how you think about that, or what your process is around it.
Yeah, I think for me, I try to gather, like I said, I was gathering stories and I was reading them and taking notes and seeing like similarities in some of the stories. So, for example, there would be like a tortoise or a turtle in many different stories, and I'm like, oh, that will mean a lot of things to different people, but it's there nonetheless. So I would try to find these kind of common things, and I think I'm also trying to, imagine how a story can be interpreted, and the characters themselves can be, I think they can be from different stories. And I think, but at the same time, I am imposing my own kind of like, this is this character, how I imagined it. But it might not be the same for someone else who looks at it. So I think that I do make choices and like, okay, I'm going to have this character from this story appear, and what will be reflected in that story it always does have a decision that's made like from my own, like I don't put things in there very randomly. But I do think that it's so specific in a way that it almost becomes not specific, because it has to be, it's almost like insider knowledge. But I think it's also interesting when I hear people look at the work, sometimes they'll come up with references that I had no idea, or that wasn't even something I thought about. And I think that's interesting too, because in a way, like everyone has their own, everyone will impose something on the story, and I'm just kind of leaving them there for that to be. But it's also interesting for me because sometimes I'm like, oh, I hadn't even thought of that, but I can see how that someone would see that, you know. So it opens up like a different frame of reference for every single person.
Thank you.
Okay.
Valerie, do you have your hand up? Yes.
Yes. I just wanted to ask if you believe that art school is a necessary jumping off point to becoming a professional artist.
Mm-hmm. I can only speak from my own perspective, because I know there's a lot of artists who don't go the art school route and who are successful. I think for me, what really it helps you do, because there's so much about being an artist that isn't being an artist. Like there's so much stuff you have to learn about how to write about your art, how to convey your ideas, how to apply for exhibitions, how to apply for funding, how to accept feedback, give feedback, and then also the history behind art, or the misrepresentation of certain things in art. Like those are all things you can learn at art school. And I don't think I would be able to express myself the way I did today, for example, if I hadn't gone through all those experiences of art, of talking about your art, and, you know, critiques and showing your work and those kind of things. But I at the same time, I think like, yeah, I think art is a profession in a way, and it's a career choice. It's also a passion for a lot of people, but to make it your career, I think it does require some sort of education and context, I think. But that's for me. I'm sure there's other, and that's probably, you know, that doesn't encompass all artists, because there's some artists who don't come from that they don't have the opportunity to go to art school, and yet they create things. And I think that just goes to show that there's so many ways of being an artist as well. Like people who use art to create, like it's an expression of our humanity. So we see art everywhere, and not everyone has gone to art school. So I think maybe it's just more about like, I guess in the context of becoming a professional artist, maybe I would say yes, but obviously I know that that's not, that you can be an artist and not have to go to art school ever.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Emily, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. I just wanted to say that, like Anna Binta, you're speaking to a room full of high school art educators, and I was wondering if you could go back and say something to your high school art educators, if there's something you would have wanted to say to them about, your experience in high school art, if you have any thoughts you would love to convey.
Yeah, I mean, I remember my high school art school class, and there was there was a lot of learning things from a specific viewpoint, which was very specific, white male. This is what art is. And I remember being kind of like, I'm going to do this assignment, but I don't necessarily, like, why am I getting an 80 on it or 50% on it? And I remember thinking like, it was very much, like doing a math assignment. It was either right or wrong. And I remember thinking, you do need, there are basics of art making. There's like these foundational steps to art making. But I think what I appreciated as well, they left us a lot of exploration time. So I actually do quite remember one class we had where it was like, today we're doing collage. And he left us the class, and he brought in all these old boxes of books. And I think that was my first, art is fun. Like, I want to make more art. And I think because they let us kind of explore on our own, and it wasn't this kind of imposition of like, this is pointillism. I can't remember how to say that in English, but pointillism. Like, let's make a painting and with dots. And I was like, oh, I don't want to do this, but did it anyways. But that was the class where I had the most fun. I think it was like, here's a bunch of stuff. So I think that's what my recommendation is, like, allow students to find maybe what of course there's basics, but I think allowing them to find what their niche is or what their interest is, and allowing them a little bit of like trust in that process that they can maybe find things without the supervision or like the hardcore assignments. Like it allows some time for discovery, I think.
I see, Matt, your hand is up still, but is that from before, or do you have another question? Well, then Dalen, I will maybe pass it on to you. And Matt, if you have another question, we can come back to you.
Hi, folks. I'm kind of also being part of the timekeeper here. We're getting close to the end of our time and respecting Anna Binta's time here. I want to thank all of you, and particularly I want to thank Emily and Amelia. They've done a ton of work here to organize all of this and support Anna Binta in getting the first video up of this video series. I know Amelia's just put in the chat a link to that. It's fantastic. I watched it yesterday. I wish I had students to work with it right now. And we can't thank you all enough for taking valuable time out of your Pro D Day to do this. I know we're brainstorming ways to display student artwork, so please stay tuned. We'll put some of that information out to all of you. And we do have a budget to print some stuff or from supplies. So we'll kind of iron out some of those details and connect with all of you. But Anna Binta, thank you so much. It looks bright in Montreal. It's kind of rainy here in North Vancouver. But thank you all. And that's it. I miss you all. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity again. And it's been nice to talk my process with all of you.
So yes, thanks again. And a reminder that we are recording this, which is such a great resource, so we can revisit this conversation. And we will be sharing this video on the AFK website, along with the series of 3 that I mentioned at the beginning. As Dalen said, I've posted in the chat the AFK page where that first video already is existing, and the next 2 will be coming out in the next 2 weeks. So again, I think with that, as Dalen just said, thank you so much again for sharing, Anna Binta, and for your time. And I think with that, we can close things.
Okay, thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.